Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world that constantly pressures us to make the right choice, choose the right path, open the right door, and do it quickly before opportunities disappear. From the moment we wake up, decisions surround us. And with those decisions, often comes worry. We worry about whether we are falling behind, whether we missed our moment, whether someone else walked through a door that was meant for us. That quiet anxiety settles into our hearts and begins to whisper fear, doubt, and restlessness. Yet there is a profound truth that brings peace to a troubled mind. God knows which door is yours, and He has never once been confused about your future. Worry usually grows when we believe everything depends on us. We think if we do not force a door open, it will remain closed forever. We assume that timing is fragile and that one wrong step can ruin everything. But God does not operate under panic or pressure. He sees the beginning and the end at the same time. He understands what you need not only today but years from now. When a door is truly meant for you, no amount of delay, opposition, or uncertainty can cancel God's plan. And when a door is not meant for you, forcing it open will only lead to unnecessary pain and exhaustion. Many people spend their lives knocking on doors God never asked them to approach. They invest energy into relationships, careers, and dreams that look good on the surface but bring no lasting peace. Deep down, there is a constant sense of striving, a feeling that something is off. That inner unrest is often God's gentle way of redirecting us. Closed doors are not always rejection. Sometimes they are protection. God sees dangers we cannot see, outcomes we cannot predict, and burdens we were never meant to carry. Worry also comes when we compare our journey with others. We look at people who seem to be moving faster, achieving more, and stepping into opportunities that we desire. We forget that God writes a unique story for every life. The door God opens for someone else may not fit your calling, your character, or your future. What appears to be success for one person could become a heavy burden for another. God custom designs His guidance, and His timing is always intentional, never accidental. When God closes a door, it is not because He has run out of options. It is because He has something better aligned with His purpose for you. Trusting this truth requires faith, especially when the hallway feels long and uncertain. Waiting seasons can be uncomfortable. They test our patience and expose our fears. But waiting is not wasted time. It is often the season where God prepares our hearts, strengthens our character, and teaches us to rely on Him rather than our own understanding. There is peace that comes when you surrender the need to control outcomes, when you release your grip on worry and say, God, I trust you with what I cannot see. Something shifts inside. You begin to rest not because everything is clear, but because you know who is leading you. God does not reveal every step at once. He guides us one step at a time so that we learn to walk by faith, not by sight. Sometimes God allows doors to remain closed longer than we expect, not to frustrate us, but to protect us from stepping in too soon. An open door at the wrong time can be just as harmful as a closed one. Timing matters. God's delays are not denials. They are often expressions of His wisdom and love. He knows when you are ready, when the environment is right, and when the outcome will bring the greatest good. Worry fades when we remember God's faithfulness in the past. Look back and recall the times you were anxious, unsure, and afraid, yet somehow you were carried through. Doors opened in ways you never imagined. Paths appeared where there seemed to be none. The same God who guided you then is guiding you now. He has not changed, and His promises remain true. Faith does not mean the absence of fear. It means choosing trust in the presence of uncertainty. Every time you resist worry and choose to believe that God is working behind the scenes, your faith grows stronger. You may not know which door will open, but you can be confident that God knows and He will make it clear at the right moment. Let your heart be still. You do not have to chase every opportunity or panic over every closed door. Walk faithfully where you are. Do what is right in front of you and trust God with the rest. He is never late, never early, and never mistaken. The door that belongs to you will open with clarity, peace, and purpose. And when it does, you will recognize it not by pressure, but by the quiet assurance that only God can give. Worry begins to take root in the human heart. When we quietly assume that everything depends on us, it grows when we believe that our future is fragile, that one wrong decision can destroy years of effort, and that if we do not push hard enough, we will miss what was meant for us. This mindset places an unbearable weight on the soul. It turns life into a constant race, a never-ending effort to control outcomes that were never ours to control in the first place. The truth is, God never intended for us to live under that kind of pressure. He never asked us to carry the responsibility of determining our own destiny without His guidance. When we take on the belief that everything depends on our effort alone, worry becomes unavoidable. Every closed door feels like failure. Every unanswered prayer feels like abandonment. But this perspective forgets who God is. He is not reactive. He is intentional. He is not guessing. He is guiding. Long before you face your current decision, God already saw the outcome. He knows which door is yours. Not because He is waiting to see what you will choose, but because He has already woven His purpose into your life with precision and care. Worry also thrives when we confuse responsibility with control. Yes, we are called to be faithful, diligent, and obedient, but control belongs to God alone. When we cross that line and try to manage what only He can handle, peace slips away. We start replaying conversations, second-guessing choices, and imagining worst-case scenarios. Our minds stay busy, but our hearts grow tired. God invites us to a different way of living, one where trust replaces tension and faith replaces fear. The reason peace becomes possible is simple yet profound. God already knows the door that belongs to you. You do not have to discover it through anxiety or force it open through effort. When something is truly meant for you, God does not hide it behind confusion. He may delay it, prepare you for it, or shape you through the waiting. But He will never require you to destroy your peace to reach it. The doors God opens come with clarity, not chaos. Many people worry because they are afraid of missing God's will. They imagine it as a narrow path where one misstep ruins everything. But God's guidance is not that fragile. He is able to redirect, correct, and restore. Even when we make mistakes, His grace remains active. If God can use imperfect people to accomplish perfect purposes, then your future is far more secure than your worry suggests. Worry fades when we remember that God sees what we cannot see. We look at doors based on appearance, opportunity, and timing. God looks at impact, character, and long-term consequences. What seems like a great opportunity today may become a heavy burden tomorrow. What feels like a painful delay now may be essential preparation for what lies ahead. Trusting God means believing that His perspective is greater than ours, even when His ways do not immediately make sense. There is also freedom in realizing that you are not in competition with anyone. God does not assign the same door to multiple people and then ask them to race for it. What is meant for you cannot be taken by someone else. This truth alone can quiet so much worry. You do not have to compare your progress with our timing or your success with others. God's plan for your life is personal, intentional, and secure. When we truly accept that God knows which door is ours, we begin to live differently. We pray with surrender instead of desperation. We work with diligence, but rest with confidence. We stop forcing outcomes and start trusting timing. Life becomes less about striving and more about following. Peace replaces panic, not because every answer is clear, but because the one leading us is trustworthy. Worry loses its power when faith takes its rightful place. Faith reminds us that God is already at work even when we cannot see the results. It reassures us that delays are not denials and that closed doors are not the end of the story. When we release the need to control and choose to trust, we experience a deep, steady peace that circumstances cannot steal. God has never been confused about your future, and He never will be. The door that belongs to you is not hidden by accident, delayed by mistake, or threatened by failure. It exists within God's perfect knowledge and timing, and learning to trust that truth is the beginning of freedom from worry. Closed doors often carry a meaning far deeper than disappointment. Yet our first reaction is usually to interpret them as rejection or failure. When something does not work out the way we hoped, worry rushes in and convinces us that we were not good enough, fast enough, or deserving enough. But this way of thinking overlooks a powerful truth. Many closed doors are not evidence of God withholding something good, but proof of Him protecting us from something harmful. God's love is not only shown in what He gives, but also in what He refuses to allow. Protection is one of the quietest forms of God's care. It does not always feel comforting in the moment because it often comes wrapped in disappointment. We had plans, expectations, and dreams tied to that door. We imagined how life would look if it opened, how satisfied we would feel, how secure we would become. When it closes, the loss feels personal, yet God sees beyond our imagination. He sees the unseen pressures, the hidden compromises, the future consequences that would have slowly drained our peace. What we mourn as loss, God knows as rescue. Many people look back on their lives and realize that the things they once begged God for would have caused great harm if He had allowed them. Relationships that seemed perfect on the surface, but would have eroded their values. Opportunities that promised success, but required sacrificing integrity. Paths that looked exciting, but would have led to exhaustion, pride, or emptiness. At the time, the closed door felt cruel. In hindsight, it became clear that God's refusal was an act of mercy. Worry increases when we assume we know what is best for us. We judge situations by comfort, speed, and appearance. God judges by purpose, growth, and eternity. He is not only concerned with where a door leads, but with who we become if we walk through it. Some doors would stretch us in unhealthy ways, pulling us away from who God is shaping us to be. Others would place burdens on us before we have the strength or wisdom to carry them. God closes those doors not to punish us, but to preserve us. There are times when a door closes repeatedly. No matter how hard we try, we push, we knock, we pray with frustration, and still it remains shut. This persistence of closure is often God's clear communication. He is saying that this path is not aligned with His will for us. Continuing to force it only deepens our anxiety and drains our spiritual energy. Peace comes when we stop fighting God's direction and start trusting His discernment. Closed doors also protect us from becoming attached to outcomes rather than obedience. When everything works out easily, it is tempting to believe that success defines God's favor. But when doors close, we are reminded that our security is not in results, but in relationship with God. He wants our trust more than our comfort. He desires our dependence more than our applause. By closing certain doors, He gently pulls our hearts back to Him. Sometimes the protection of a closed door is not about danger, but about distraction. Not every good opportunity is the right opportunity. God may close a door simply because it would divert our focus from what truly matters. We may be busy, productive, and admired, yet spiritually dry and misaligned. God cares too much about our spiritual health to let us settle for a life that looks successful but feels empty. There is also protection in timing. A door may close now because opening it later will bring far greater impact. If God allowed us to walk through certain doors before we were ready, the weight of responsibility could crush us. Character must grow before capacity. Wisdom must develop before influence. God's delays are often His way of ensuring that when the right door opens, we are able to walk through it with humility and strength. When we begin to view closed doors through the lens of protection, worry starts to loose its grip. We no longer see ourselves as victims of bad timing or missed chances. Instead, we recognize God as an active, loving guide who is involved in every detail of our journey. Trust grows when we accept that God's no is just as purposeful as His yes. Learning to thank God for closed doors is a sign of spiritual maturity. It does not mean the disappointment disappears, but it means we trust His heart even when we do not understand His hand. We acknowledge that God knows what we need better than we do, and that His plans are shaped by love, not limitation. As this trust deepens, worry begins to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence that nothing God blocks was ever meant to fulfill us in the first place. Comparison is one of the fastest ways to steal peace from the heart. Yet, it is something nearly everyone struggles with. We look at the lives of others and measure our progress against theirs, assuming that if they are moving faster, achieving more, or experiencing visible success, then we must be doing something wrong. This mindset quietly fuels worry because it convinces us that God is somehow treating others better than us, or that we are falling behind in a race we never agreed to run. But God never designed life to be lived in comparison. He designed it to be lived in calling. Every person is given a unique path shaped by their purpose, personality, and assignment. God does not mass-produce destinies. He crafts them individually. When we compare our journey to someone else's, we are often comparing our behind the scenes with their highlight moments. We do not see the sacrifices they have made, the struggles they carry, or the lessons they had to learn before certain doors opened. We only see the surface, and then we allow worry to fill in the gaps with assumptions that are rarely true. Worry intensifies when comparison causes us to doubt God's timing. We start asking why their door opened while ours remains closed. Oh, you wonder why opportunities seem to find them so easily while we are still waiting. In these moments, it is easy to forget that timing is not a sign of favor or neglect. It is a sign of preparation. God opens doors when they align with His plan, not when they align with our impatience. What looks like delay in one life may actually be careful, loving preparation. God's timing is deeply personal. What would bless one person at a certain stage might overwhelm another. Some people are prepared early because their journey requires it. Others are protected through longer seasons of waiting because their calling demands greater depth, maturity, or resilience. God knows exactly how much we can handle and when we are ready to handle it. Comparing ourselves to others ignores this truth and replaces trust with tension. Comparison also distorts our view of success. We begin to define success by visible outcomes instead of spiritual alignment. We assume that open doors, applause, and recognition mean God's approval. But God measures success differently. He looks at obedience, faithfulness, and the condition of the heart. A person can walk through many doors and still be far from God's best, while another may be waiting patiently and growing closer to Him every day. Worry fades when we realize that God values who we are becoming more than what we are achieving. When we compare, we often desire doors that were never meant for us. We see someone else's opportunity and assume it would bring us the same fulfillment. But every door carries responsibility, pressure, and challenges that match the person called to walk through it. What fits one life perfectly may feel heavy and restrictive in another. God chooses doors based on calling, not appearance. Trusting this truth frees us from the anxiety of wanting what was never designed for us. There is peace in knowing that no one can take what God has specifically assigned to you. God is not running a competition where the fastest wins. What is meant for you cannot be stolen, delayed by others, or lost due to comparison. Your path unfolds according to God's wisdom, not human timelines. When you truly believe this, the urge to measure yourself against others begins to lose its power. Comparison also blinds us to the blessings we already have. While we focus on what others are doing, we overlook how God is working in our own lives. We miss the quiet growth, the small victories, the answered prayers that did not look the way we expected but still carried God's faithfulness. Gratitude is a powerful antidote to comparison. When we intentionally recognize what God is doing in our life, worry has less room to grow. God never asks us to understand someone else's journey, only to trust Him with our own. The moment we stop comparing and start trusting, we experience freedom. We walk more confidently, wait more patiently, and live more peacefully. We no longer feel rushed or left behind because we know we are exactly where God wants us to be in this season. When comparison fades, faith rises. We begin to see waiting as purposeful, not painful. We learn to celebrate others without resenting our own timing. We rest in the assurance that God's plan for our life is unfolding exactly as it should, even when it looks different from the lives around us. Waiting is one of the most challenging seasons of life because it confers our desire for immediate answers and quick results. In a culture that values speed and instant gratification, waiting can feel like failure or neglect. Worry often creeps in during these seasons, whispering that nothing is happening and that God has forgotten us. But waiting is not an empty space where God is absent. It is an intentional season where He is deeply at work shaping us in ways that could not happen if everything moved quickly. Many people assume that progress only happens when doors are opening and opportunities are visible. Yet some of the most significant growth in life happens when nothing seems to be changing on the outside. Waiting seasons strip away our illusions of control and force us to confront what we truly trust. They reveal whether our faith is rooted in outcomes or in God Himself. As uncomfortable as this process can be, it is essential for spiritual maturity. God uses waiting to develop character before granting greater responsibility. If He opened every door the moment we asked, we might step into opportunities without the wisdom or humility required to handle them well. Success without preparation can damage a person more than failure ever could. Waiting allows God to strengthen our patience, deepen our dependence on Him, and refine our motives. It is during these quiet seasons that we learn to seek God for who He is, not just for what He can give. Worry often arises when we misunderstand the purpose of waiting. We interpret delay as denial, and silence is absence. But God's silence does not mean inactivity. Just as seeds grow underground long before anything is visible, God is often doing His most important work beneath the surface. Roots must grow before fruit can appear. If growth happened too quickly, it would not last. Waiting ensures stability, depth, and endurance. Waiting also teaches us obedience in the small things. When big doors are not opening, God often invites us to be faithful in what is already in front of us. How we handle ordinary responsibilities reveals our readiness for greater ones. God watches how we respond when no one is applauding, when progress feels slow, and when our faith is tested. These moments matter more than we realize. They shape the kind of person we will be when the right door finally opens. Another reason waiting feels so difficult is because it exposes our fears, and the quiet, unanswered questions become louder. We worry about making the wrong move, missing our moment, or being left behind. Yet waiting is where we learn to release these fears into God's hands. It teaches us that our future is not dependent on constant action, but on consistent trust. Each day we choose faith over worry. We grow stronger spiritually. God also uses waiting to align circumstances beyond our control. While we focus on our own readiness, God is working in other people, situations, and details that must come together at the right time. A door may be closed not because we are unprepared, but because something else is still being arranged. God's timing accounts for far more than we can see. What feels slow to us is often precise in His plan. Waiting reshapes our definition of success. Instead of measuring life by speed and achievement, we begin to value faithfulness and obedience. We learn that walking closely with God is more important than reaching a destination quickly. This shot brings peace because it frees us from the pressure to constantly prove ourselves. Our worth is no longer tied to how fast doors open, but to our identity as God's children. There is also a deep intimacy that develops with God during waiting seasons. When distractions fade and answers are delayed, prayer becomes more honest and dependence becomes more real. We learn to listen rather than rush, to trust rather than demand. This closeness with God becomes a source of strength that carries us long after the waiting ends. When we embrace waiting as a purposeful season, worry begins to loosen its grip. We stop asking why things are taking so long and start asking what God is teaching us. We become less focused on what we lack and more aware of how God is shaping us. Waiting transforms from a burden into a blessing when we recognize it as part of God's loving reparation for what is ahead. Worry begins to lose its power when we finally accept that control was never meant to rest in our hands. Much of our anxiety comes from the belief that we must manage every detail of our lives, anticipate every outcome, and protect ourselves from every possible disappointment. This constant need to control creates tension in the mind and heaviness in the heart. God invites us into a different posture, one of surrender, where trust replaces fear and faith replaces anxiety. Surrender does not mean giving up responsibility or becoming passive. It means acknowledging God's authority and wisdom over our lives. It is choosing to do what we can while releasing what we cannot control. When we surrender, we stop fighting for outcomes and start trusting God with them. This shift brings relief because, see, it lifts a burden we were never designed to carry. Peace flows naturally when we stop trying to play the role of God in our own lives. Worry often disguises itself as concern or preparation, but beneath it lies fear of the unknown. We want certainty before we move forward. We want guarantees before we trust. Yet faith does not operate on guarantees. It operates on relationship. Trust grows when we remember who God is, not when we understand everything He is doing. God does not ask us to see the entire path, only to walk faithfully one step at a time. As we surrender control, we begin to recognize the difference between doors that pressure us and doors that bring peace. Opportunities that come from God do not require desperation or manipulation. They do not demand that we compromise our values or rush ahead of His timing. God's doors open in ways that align with His character, bringing a deep sense of clarity and assurance. Even when challenges remain, there is an underlying peace that confirms we are where we are meant to be. Clarity often comes gradually, not suddenly. God rarely reveals His plans all at once because doing so would remove the need for trust. Instead, He gives enough light for the next step. Worry tries to fill in the unknown with fear, but faith fills it with hope. When we surrender the need to know everything, we create space for God to lead us in ways that strengthen our reliance on Him. Another source of worry is the fear of making mistakes. We worry that one wrong decision will ruin everything, but God's guidance is stronger than our missteps. He is able to redirect, restore, and redeem. Surrender means trusting that even if we stumble, God's grace will meet us there. Our future is not as fragile as our fears suggest. God's plans are resilient, shaped by His power rather than our perfection. Surrender also brings freedom from the pressure of constant decision-making. Instead of obsessing over every choice, we learn to pray, seek wisdom, and then trust God with the outcome. This approach does not eliminate challenges, but it eliminates the exhausting cycle of worry. We rest in the confidence that God honors hearts that seek Him sincerely, even when the path forward feels unclear. When we surrender control, our prayers change. They become less about demanding specific outcomes and more about asking for alignment with God's will. This kind of prayer opens our hearts to receive what God desires to give. It shifts our focus from what we want to what God knows we need. In this posture, peace becomes less dependent on circumstances and more rooted in trust. God's doors are often recognized by the peace that accompanies them. This peace does not mean the absence of difficulty, but the presence of confidence in God's leading. When a door is right, there is a sense of rightness that settles deep within, even if the journey ahead is uncertain. Surrender allows us to recognize this peace without questioning it or second-guessing ourselves. As trust deepens, worry fades. We stop trying to force answers and start resting in God's faithfulness. We become less angsty about timing and more confident in purpose. Surrender teaches us that God is fully capable of guiding our lives without our constant interference, and that true peace is found not in control, but in trusting the one who holds every door, every step, and every outcome in His hands. When we gather all these truths together, a clear and comforting picture emerges. Worry loses its grip when we remember that our lives are not random and our future is not uncertain in God's hands. He knows which door belongs to us, and He is fully capable of opening it at the right time. Closed doors are not signs of rejection, but evidence of protection and love. Waiting seasons are not empty or wasted. They are purposeful moments where God prepares our hearts, strengthens our faith, and aligns everything we cannot see. Comparison fades when we understand that God's timing and plan are personal, not competitive. And surrender brings peace because control was never meant to rest with us. As trust replaces fear, our hearts begin to rest. We stop chasing every opportunity and start walking with quiet confidence. We learn that God's guidance does not come with pressure, confusion, or panic, but with clarity, peace, and purpose. Even when the path ahead is unclear, we can move forward knowing that God is faithful, attentive, and deeply involved in every detail of our lives. The door meant for us will not require striving or anxiety. And when it opens, it will confirm what God has been teaching us all along, that His plans are always wiser than our worries, and His timing is always perfect. So stop worrying. Trust God completely and walk forward in peace, knowing He knows exactly which door is.